I booted the same dusty beta launcher I always keep in a folder called Someday. The icon a little blurrier than I remember. The world loaded in square breaths. Gravel shore, crooked dirt hut, a torch that still makes more light than it should. I wasn't hunting diamonds or endings. I just wanted to hear the old music greet me like a neighbor. Inside the hut, the chest I'd left by the bed looked ordinary, oak, honest, unimpressed. But when I opened it, there was a second chest inside it, like a joke with good manners, a single-item frame holding a tiny oak chest renamed Backup, 2010. I placed it on the floor. It thunked down with that beta sound that still feels like a handshake. When I opened the backup chest, it wasn't empty. It had 6 slots: bread X3, torch X16, wooden pick used, sign X2, feather, and a line of text in gray I'd never seen here. Refills at dawn if placed near where you learned it. I laughed even though it didn't make sense. Then I read the signs I'd left on the wall. Future me, don't forget. I'm trying. I added another, let's test it. I carried the backup chest to the gravel shore, where I'd first punched a tree until it forgave me. The sun floated up in right angles. I set the chest on the block where my footprints always feel thickest and waited. Morning edged across the water. The note that means, new day, threaded itself through the air like a promise that doesn't need witnesses. Inside, the wooden pick repaired 1 pixel. The torches climbed to 32. The bread became 4. The feather stayed a feather, because some jokes are patient. I grinned. If this was a bug, it was the kind that believes in you. I placed 1 sign next to the chest. Refills yesterday. Then I packed like a beta player does. 2 mini torches, a shovel I didn't deserve yet, bread for courage, and pointed my boots toward the birch on the hill that I named mine when naming things felt like staking a star. The path wasn't a path yet, just my old habit of walking high left, low right, dropping torches where the world says, keep going. The birch still wore that generous canopy that turns ladders into ladders and answers. I climbed, hammered a platform into the leaves, and placed the backup chest at the tree's heart. When the afternoon eased itself into amber, I checked the inventory again. Now there was a stone hoe, almost new, something I hadn't crafted today. The feather had grown a buddy. I remembered a summer when farming felt like writing letters to wheat, and for an instant the air smelled like that. I planted a tiny patch under glass, sugarcane by the pond, 2 rows of seeds, 1 pumpkin spot because hope loves a square. At sunset I watched shadows stack into pleasant rectangles and promised the tree, I'll come back at dawn. Old worlds make you good at keeping small promises. The cave that always rained was still a rumor under the hill. I followed its rumor. Torches bloomed on walls with the quiet confidence of old rituals. At a bend, I found something impossible, a vanilla chest tucked behind gravel, labeled Backup, Spawn Point. I didn't place it. My cheeks went cold in the fun way. Inside, pork chop X2, cooked, coal X12, ladder X8, sign X1, and a clock, Beta's flat sun trapped in a gold frame. It only ticked when I took a step, like time respected my pacing. I added a ladder to my spiral, pocketed coal, and put the sign on the wall, time moves when you do. At the bottom, the lava room had the same sermon, all orange and patient. I capped it with cobble and left a little window for glow. The clock face hummed in my hand, not audibly, just that feeling. I decided to place a backup chest down here too and see if the cave remembered different things than the shore. Dawn tested the theory. I started on the gravel beach. The backup, 2010, chest had grown a boat, as if some careful librarian of memories knew I'd been too landbound. At the birch, the chest had learned seeds X16 and a music disc, cat, because of course Patience likes a soundtrack. In the cave, the lava window chest refilled cobble X32 and bucket, empty, useful, humble, exactly the cave's personality. I carried the boat to the square edge of the bay and slid it into water. Boats from this age glide like you apologized first. I followed the coastline until cliffs forgot to slope, then landed on a patch of sand with a single torch stuck like a tooth. My torch height, my handwriting, load only what you love. I placed another backup chest there, backup, shoreline, and felt a silly joy bloom. It wasn't duping, it was remembering. And it was teaching me how to remember on purpose. I wanted to ask the chest questions, the way you talk to dogs and old worlds. So I crafted a loop, a slow path from hut to birch to cave to shoreline, each chest on a single block with a sign describing what it had learned. The loop felt like a prayer you walk instead of say. On lap 2, the birch chest taught me glass X6, exactly enough to roof the farm plot like it deserved weather without danger. The cave one offered iron X5, not plenty, not stingy, a fair wage for patience. The shore provided paper X3, which I folded into maps that couldn't yet see me. I pinned one in the tree and wrote on it with signs where ink couldn't go, bench here. Breath here. Bridge someday. The hut chest finally changed the feather. It became book and quill, an anachronism that Beta never knew, but my world did. I wrote one line. Refill what taught me, not what I hoard. The page absorbed it like sand takes footprints, and then decides to keep them. By evening I got brave and placed the chest in the nether, on a ledge the portal had spat me onto years ago, glowstone hanging like fossilized lightning. I named it Backup, Not Yet, and surrounded it with fences the way you pen an idea until it behaves. The first dawn it learned nothing. The second added netherrack X16 and flint and steel, half used, which felt like the nether saying, I'll give you heat. You decide the fire. I left the flint untouched, remembering a different sign, light this when you forgive yourself. Not yet. I put a note instead, forgiveness counts as fuel. On my way out a gas sang its broken radio lullaby. I didn't shoot it, I thanked it for practicing vulnerability in a key only it understood. With the loop humming, I started building the thing I used to rush through, a slow bridge that didn't aim to cross the ocean so much as hold hands with it. Oak posts, fences like ribs, slabs like long thoughts. Every 20 blocks I mounted an item frame and set a torch inside, a tiny portrait gallery of yes. I anchored one more backup chest at the bridgehead. Dawn gifted it fence X24 and a sign bold, the bold part was new. The text etched darker, letters taller. Arriving can be the point. I laughed, because apparently my world had decided to be a coach with good boundaries. I rode a minecart 5 blocks along the toy rail spur I placed for the joy of clicking and hopped off because 5 blocks was enough today. The bell I added to a sand pillar dinged in C. The sound traveled like small courage. One morning, the hut chest surprised me with pumpkin seeds X1, a rare relic from when pumpkins felt like myths. I planted it by the glass roof farm and made a sign that said, Someday pie. Even though pies didn't exist yet and probably wouldn't here. Nostalgia lets you pre-grieve and pre-celebrate. I chose the second. At the birch, the backup offered jukebox, paid for by yesterday's mining and maybe by whatever kindness powers these rules. I carried it up the ladder and slid in. Cat. Piano dust settled over leaves. I didn't place a second disc. I let quiet be a co-writer. Down at the cave, the chest learned water bucket full. I poured a tiny fall into a notch so the room could practice being gentle. Lava glowed on, water answered softly. Balance, Beta style. The shoreline chest began telling jokes. Boat, slightly crooked, fishing rod, used once, ink sac X1 like it had eavesdropped on my map ambitions. I fished exactly long enough to catch nothing and feel peaceful, then framed the rod over a bench with the caption, Try again tomorrow. On the bridge, fog licked the rails in perfect squares. I tuned the bell to be for a night, then back to sea at dawn. I added a tiny alcove with a chest labeled for anyone and stocked it with bread the backup had taught me to share. Even if, anyone, is me, the sign matters. Generosity is a building style. The loop had become a metronome. I walked it twice daily, hut, birch, cave, shore, bridge, and the portal I listened to without crossing. The clock ticked only when I moved. I liked that it trusted my pace. Of course I tested the edges. I carried a backup chest to the chunk seam when newer code met older hills with no apology. I named it Backup, Between, and placed it half on each side like a translator. At dawn it split its gift, Cobble X8, old, and stone X8 new. Two textures that agreed to share a slot. I placed them alternately down the seam, a zipper you could walk. Another day, I hid a chest in a boat and anchored it at the mouth of the bay. It learned torch X1 and nothing else, over and over, as if to say, "Light is enough." I left it. I didn't need more. When the pumpkin finally sprouted, I stared like I'd seen a comet, and then pretended not to be sentimental. I carved one face into it with the shears that didn't exist, and the game forgave the mime. The lantern inside my head turned on anyway. The world had taught me its rule: place what taught you, and it will refill you with yesterday's courage. I decided to finish it properly, with a sign on the lighthouse where the wind always finds the right chord. I climbed at dusk, glowstone under each corner not to banish dark, just to outline it. I set the last backup chest by the ladder and wrote backup, return. At dawn it learned only sign X1, plain, undecorated. I used it beneath the roof message. This world saves differently. Then I looked out, treehouse breathing music, glass farm practicing shelter, cave windowed with love and patience, seam wearing its zipper, bridge counting fence posts like prayers. I walked back to the hut, placed one loaf in every for anyone chest, tuned the bell to C, and stood in the doorway long enough to memorize the room, bed, chest, clock, the first torch that still believes in newcomers. I clicked save and quit to title. The menu breathed. The music rose like tide. Somewhere inside those chunks, the backup chests were resting on the blocks that taught me, ready to refill tomorrow with a little more yesterday, exactly at the speed I choose. I didn't plan on loading back in so soon, but the old menu's piano tugged harder than my to-do list. The world blinked awake with that chunk-by-chunk stutter that feels like memory organizing itself. First thing I checked was the backup, return, chest on the lighthouse roof. Inside, one sign again, but the text appeared already written. It read, "See what grows when you leave." I turned, and the pumpkin patch below had doubled, two orange faces grinning through their square leaves. Down the ladder, I walked the loop. Hut chest, bread X3, as dependable as a neighbor waving every morning. Birch chest, seeds X8, patient and generous. Cave chest, iron X2, quiet but useful. Shoreline chest, boat, new, reminding me that adventures don't have to be epic to matter. Bridge chest, fence X4, always just enough to extend the line by a few careful steps. I placed the new fences, counted breaths, and sat on the bench at the midpoint. The bell rang once in the fog, clear, steady enough. I realized the loop wasn't just teaching me how to remember, it was teaching me how to arrive, again and again, and call that living. I sailed the new boat at dawn, hugging the coast until I found a sandbar I swear hadn't existed before. A single oak sapling grew there, impossible, already 1 block tall. No torch, no sign, just a quiet dare. I placed a backup chest beside it, naming it Backup Someday Tree. At the next sunrise it filled with bone meal X1. The world was giving me permission. I sprinkled the meal, and the sapling jumped into a full tree, its canopy brushing the sky like it had been waiting years. I built a small ladder up its trunk and placed a sign at the top. "Look how far you came just by staying." From that perch, I could see the lighthouse glow, the bridge spine, the zipper seam, and the birch tree that started this loop. Every landmark was visible, like a constellation drawn in blocks. The wind, or the ambience pretending to be wind, sighed through the leaves. I hummed the breadcrumb notes, G, G, B, C, and for the first time, I didn't need the chests to echo them back. The song was mine to carry now, stitched into the air. Evening fell, and I decided on one last ritual. I took each chest's gift and placed it back into the world, not stored, not hoarded, returned. Bread went to the for anyone chests, torches lined the seam steps, fences extended the bridge by 2, seeds tucked into the farm under glass, and the iron smelted into a bucket that I filled with water and set by the pumpkin, like a blessing bowl. At the hut, I left the clock ticking softly on the bed, knowing time only moves when I do. Then I stood at the doorway and looked out, gravel path glowing with patient torches, the bay holding the sand bell steady, the bridge stretching like an unhurried thought. I added one last sign, taller than the rest, nailed just above the chest that began it all. Backup isn't storage, it's remembering. The letters shone in the torchlight, steady and sure. Then I clicked save and quit to title. The menu music rose, patient as tide. This time I didn't feel like I'd left the world. I felt like the world had agreed to keep walking the loop for me, fence post by fence post, torch by torch, until I was ready to return. The next time I logged in, the air felt lighter, as if the world had been tidying itself in my absence. The gravel shore gleamed with an extra torch I didn't remember placing. The hut chest held its usual bread and torches, but tucked between them was a new item, map unfilled. No label. No hint. Just blank paper waiting for movement. I crafted a compass to bind it, though in beta it never truly listened. As I walked, the map traced slow corners of shoreline, hill, and farm. The lines were faint, incomplete, and somehow more beautiful than any filled square. The backup chest at the birch had left me ink sac X1 as if to encourage the ritual. I added it to the map's edge, anointing it with yesterday's patience. On the bridge, the chest gave me boat named Try. The name startled me. Chests don't name things, but there it was. I smiled, dropped the boat into the bay, and let it carry me nowhere important. The bell chimed across the fog, softer this time, as if the world itself had learned to whisper. I returned to the seam where old and new terrain shook hands. The backup, between, chest now offered glass pane X1. Just one. I placed it in the middle of the glowstone zipper, a window for no one, and crouched to peer through. From that angle, the world looked divided and whole at once. Beside the pane, I added a sign. Wholeness can look stitched. The sheep from earlier wandered by again, chewing grass without ceremony. I sheared it once more, then released the wool into the seam's breeze like a message. Watching it depend felt like an answer. When night came, I lit lanterns across the terraces, not to conquer darkness but to give it rhythm. The scene glowed like a spine again, glass and light working together like memory that doesn't need to be flawless to be true. At dawn, I checked the hut chest and found something I didn't expect, Diamond X1. Just one, glimmering in the square light. I carried it up to the lighthouse roof and framed it on the wall beneath the sign. When you leave the light on for the next version of you. The diamond shone faintly, less like wealth and more like punctuation. I resisted the urge to craft anything. I left it there as a lamp for whoever I'd be next time. Then I walked the loop again, slower than usual. Every chest still offered its modest gifts, seeds, fences, bread, coal. The bridge stretched further, the pumpkin patch swelled, the bell tuned itself kindly. At the end of the day, I wrote one last sign in the hut. Some worlds don't end. They wait. I stepped outside, looked at the boat nose toward water, and for the first time didn't wonder whether I should take it. I already had. And when I clicked save and quit to title, the music rose like a tide carrying me gently home. The world kept breathing in squares, patient as ever, until I was ready to walk its loop again. When I returned, the world seemed to greet me with a pause, as though the chunks took a breath before appearing. The gravel crunched the same, the birch waved its pixel leaves, but the hut chest had changed. Inside, sign X1 pre-written. The text read simply, "Welcome back." It was the first time a chest spoke to me without waiting for my hand. I placed the sign on the hut's wall beside the others. Future me, don't forget. I'm trying. I remember. Now welcome back. The 4 lines together felt like a diary that had learned to answer. I made the loop again, this time humming the breadcrumb notes on purpose. Each chest gave modest gifts, but together they made a kind of sentence: torches, seeds, cobble, bread, fences. The shoreline chest added compass, unsteady, its needle twitching like it wanted to follow music instead of spawn. I tucked it into a frame over the sand bell, where it could spin forever and still belong. Night fell gentle. From the bridge midpoint, I looked back at the lighthouse glow and forward at the fog. Both felt like home. Morning began with a surprise at the backup, someday tree, chest. Instead of the usual bone meal or seeds, it gave me a book and quill, an item Beta never carried but my world kept insisting on. Inside, a single line already written. Every loop is practice for returning. I climbed the tree's ladder, sat on the canopy, and wrote beneath it. Every return is practice for staying. Closing the book felt like finishing a conversation I'd been having with myself for years. I placed it back in the chest. From that height, I could see the scene glowing, the bridge stretching, the pumpkin patch swelling into orange lanterns, and the hut chimney torch still burning its steady square of light. It struck me that nothing here had grown fast, and that was the point. When the sun set, I didn't walk the loop. I just sat in the tree until the stars arrived, blocky and sincere. Then I descended, placed my tools in the hut chest, and clicked save and quit to title with empty hands. The menu music rose like it had been waiting for me to finally travel light. The next time I logged in, I did so without tools, without bread, without even torches in my hotbar. The world spawned me on the gravel shore exactly as I'd left it, bare hands, but not unprepared. The hut chest had replenished the usual bread and torches, yet tucked in the corner was something new, bed, white. In Beta, that shouldn't have been possible, but there it was, plain and unassuming. I carried it to the bridge midpoint and placed it beneath the alcove chest labeled for anyone. When night came, I lay down, expecting only the hard cut to dawn. Instead, I dreamed in blocks, flashes of the old dirt hut, the birch canopy, the lava window in the cave, the seams stitched with glowstone. Each landmark flickered like a slideshow of patience, then merged into one torch, glowing steady. When morning returned, I stood on the bridge and realized the world had finally given me a way to rest not just in body, but in memory. The bed wasn't for skipping night, it was for carrying the day into tomorrow without losing its shape. I visited each chest with lighter steps. The hut, bread, torches, and a bucket full of water, as if to quench more than thirst. The birch, seeds and disc, 13, which I carried up and played, letting its uneasy echoes blend with the leaf rustle. It no longer frightened me, it sounded like honesty. The cave, iron and glass pane next to, enough to add a window beside the lava glow, balancing heat with clarity. The shoreline, a boat and paper X1, encouraging me to chart again. The bridge chest, though, offered something different, torch, renamed, enough. I placed it in the item frame at the midpoint and watched its glow settle, softer than the others but somehow deeper. The bell rang once in C, perfectly in step. That night I stood on the lighthouse roof, looked across every torchlit path and bench and seam, and felt the loop complete itself, not closed, but whole. For the first time I didn't think about quitting to title. I thought about staying. The world wasn't just waiting for me anymore. It was walking beside me, one torch at a time. When I spawned in again, the world greeted me with weather. Beta rain fell in heavy, square sheets, loud but strangely kind. I stepped from the hut to the gravel shore and watched drops scatter torches without dimming them. The backup 2010 chest had filled itself with an odd assortment, bread X1, torch X1, and glass block X1. A single of each, as though to say, keep it simple. I carried the glass up to the treehouse canopy and placed it in the floor, a skylight for rain to tap politely. The sound was richer up there, each drop like a soft drum. The chest at the birch had given me boat, unnamed, which I set adrift in the pond below, letting it bump gently against dirt banks. The cave chest had replaced its iron offering with coal X3, small but enough to light the lava window warmer. At the bridge, the chest gave me only fence X1. I added it to the railing, a tiny extension that felt like the world reminding me that progress can be one block at a time. When the rain cleared, the torches steamed softly, and the path gleamed like it had been freshly polished. That evening, I rowed out in the unnamed boat. The water was calm, the stars sharp as chisels. At the sand pillar, the bell chimed faintly with the rocking of waves, unprompted but perfectly in tune. I beached on a tiny island, just 3 sand blocks and a single wildflower. On impulse, I placed a backup chest and named it Backup Island. At dawn, it held torch, renamed Stay. Nothing else. I placed it beside the flower, and the light spilled outward, making the little island glow like it mattered as much as any lighthouse. From the bridge, I could just make out its flicker across the bay, a dot of stubborn light against endless water. Returning home, I walked the loop slower than usual, humming the breadcrumb melody under my breath. I realized the tune had changed. No longer G, E, G, B, C, now it ended on A, unresolved but peaceful. A note that didn't close the song, only left it breathing. That night, I stood on the hut doorstep, looking at the framed torch above the door, the bridge stretching steady, the scene glowing its quiet lightning. The world had stopped asking me to remember. It was asking me to stay. Morning arrived with a square-edged brightness and a feeling that the loop had learned my footsteps. The hut chest held its bread and torch jet plus a sign, pre-written. It read, "Put this where you pause." I carried it to the seam steps and fixed it beside the glass pane window and the glowstone zipper. From there, the world looked like two paragraphs that finally agreed on a tone. I sat a while and let torches do the talking. At the Birch, the backup offered ladder X6, enough to make the canopy easier for the version of me who's tired. I added rungs until the climb felt like kindness, then played Cat once, stopping before the last measure to save a chord for later. The cave chest gave bucket lava warm. I didn't place it, just held it until the heat convinced my hands to unclench. On the bridge, the chest provided fence X2 and a trapdoor. I hinged the trapdoor on the midpoint alcove and discovered the smallest joy. It made a soft thop that sounded exactly like a day deciding to be gentle. The bell answered in C without being asked. I rode to the backup island at dusk to check on the stay torch. Its puddle of light felt braver than its size. The chest refilled torch stay again, as if doubling down on the lesson. I planted the second torch on the opposite edge so the island held the night like cupped hands. Back on the mainland, rain started, the beta kind that booms louder than weather has any right to. I opened the treehouse skylight trapdoor and let the sounds sit with me. The birch chest had slipped me glass X2. I replaced 2 leaf blocks near the jukebox, small windows to watch the storm without demanding a view. 13. On the turntable sounded less haunted when the rain kept time. Before sleep, I visited the shoreline pillar. I tuned the bell down to B, then up to C again, just to feel the world nod. I left the boat nudged toward open water and walked home along torches spaced like breaths you don't have to think about anymore. The next dawn, something new. The hut chest contained a compass, named Home is a Loop. The needle twitched and then settled, not on spawn, not on bed, but pointed vaguely along the path I walk every morning. I framed it over the hut door beside the first torch, and felt the doorway turn into a thesis. I tested the compass by walking the loop slightly wrong. Hut shore bridge, birch cave. The needle tolerated my improvisation, always relaxing once my feet found the next honest landmark. At the seam, the between chest gave mossy cobble X3, old dungeon perfume. I tucked the stones into the seam steps as green commas, little pauses you could stand on. That evening I crafted signs for future me with unembarrassed earnestness. Water first. Sit if you can. Fence posts are time. I mounted them where habits live, beside the farm, at the bridgehead, near the cave bench. The world didn't roll its eyes. It simply held the word steady. I decided to try one last experiment with the backups. I carried a chest to the gravel square where I first punched a tree and labeled it backup, quiet, without placing any note blocks, rails, or bells nearby, no signals, no incentives. At dawn, it refilled nothing. The empty inventory felt correct. The sign learned a second line by itself. Quiet refills with quiet. I laughed, relieved that even the magic had boundaries. To celebrate, I did almost nothing, trimmed sugarcane, extended the bridge by exactly 1 fence, tuned the bell and then untuned it back, added a single leaf to the treehouse floor because a gap asked nicely. On the lighthouse roof I wrote a small addendum under the big message. If lost, try slower. Night came like a mercy. I lay on the for anyone bed at the bridge midpoint, and watched stars pin themselves to the sky with calm insistence. The bell breathed once somewhere between sea and silence. I click save and quick to title with the pleasant certainty that nothing urgent would evaporate while I was gone. This world has learned me, I've learned it back. Whenever I return, the loop will be right where I left it, asking only what it always asks. Step, torch, breathe, notice, repeat. I logged in knowing it would be the last time, for now, at least. The air on the gravel shore carried that beta stillness, the kind that hums with enough memory to fill silence. The hut chest held a modest spread, bread X1, torch X1, sign, pre-written. The sign already said, "Endings are just longer pauses." I placed it above the door, completing the wall of voices from every version of me that had walked these squares. I took one slow lap of the loop, farm under its glass roof, birch ladder climbing into leaves, cave window glowing lava, seam stitched bright with mossy commas, bridge carrying light across water, bell tuned steady at sea, and the little island still clutching its pair of stay torches. At each chest, I bowed, not out of ritual, but gratitude. Back at the lighthouse, I climbed to the roof one final time. The diamond framed on the wall glimmered softly, not as treasure but as punctuation. Beneath it, I added one last line. Good enough to remember. Then I turned to the horizon, let the sky fold into squares of dusk, and click save and quick to title. The menu music rose like tide, carrying me away gently. And somewhere inside those chunks, the loop kept walking itself, step, torch, breathe, notice, repeat, waiting patiently for the day I decide to return.